Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Treasure Travel, and here's her story. Hi, Ollie. The holidays are approaching. Oops, sorry. Yeah, I know. It's been a rough one. I used to hate the holidays, but when I was a young adult, because of the shitty times with my origin family. Now I love everything about celebrating with my husband and children. I am happy to report the following account is about my endgame with respect to dealing with my origin family. Checkmate. Something that has always puzzled my husband, Greg, was that my parents were so uninterested in our two children, their only grandchildren. Greg and his siblings were raised by emotionally mature parents who gave unconditional love to their children and grandchildren and have always been so delighted to visit with our children. In stark contrast, my parents were always negative, bickering, uninterested, and hard to please. Marrying into my husband's family was eye-opening for me. Imagine my surprise to find myself in a family whose members enjoyed being together, especially for the holidays. I am grateful that my kids did get to have one set of wonderful grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, and wonderful childhood memories of happy family gatherings. Consistent with my observation that my parents are narcissists and Greg's parents are normal is the fact that my parents raised 3 children, all with generalized anxiety disorder, depression, low self-esteem, and worse. In contrast, Greg's parents raised 4 children who all grew up to be mentally healthy, happy, loving, and accomplished adults who have all raised mentally healthy, happy, and loving adult children. Regardless of the fact that my sister wants to believe that our parents are not narcissists, the observational data on their offspring cannot be denied. My parents have usually sent checks to my kids for Christmas. As they got older, the amount gradually increased from $50 to about $300. We have traditionally called my parents on Christmas Day to wish them and thank them for their generosity. For years, I sent them a large gift basket with various treats such as expensive tea, coffee, nuts, chocolate, etc. My mom never thanked us, although my dad usually did. According to my sister, my mother would pick through the gift baskets criticizing the content. Of course she did. I mean, like, why? And the more time you spend on it, the more they're going to pick it apart. I mean, and it's, again, already disinterested with your children. Look, we've discussed your sister ad nauseum. Like, she wants to believe what she wants to believe, and because it benefits her. Therefore, I stopped sending holiday gifts about 5 years ago. My parents never, ever would call on a holiday, as the onus was always on us to reach out to them. This is typical of narcissistic parents. The phone only works in one direction. Right. And God forbid, it only works in one direction, and God forbid you don't call them. It's all a test, okay? So it's a treachery at every turn during the narcissistic holiday, okay? No matter what, they got a plan to attack you with it. They can attack you from 100 different angles. 2 Christmases ago, which was a year into my mostly no contact status, was a dilemma for me. I knew it was expected that I call them on Christmas Day, but I certainly did not want to. My dad had sent a generic card with a check for each of my kids for $300, which made me feel obligated to call them so my kids could thank them. We said Merry Christmas and briefly talked about the weather. Although I did not want my kids to cash these checks, they were adults, so I did not want to push my issues onto them. Wait, this is 2 Christmases ago. These aren't little kids. Listen, if your kids want to fucking pick up the phone and just say, this is something that would drive me fucking insane. It would drive me insane. Not that I didn't want to say thank you, but don't sit there and make me fucking call these fucking people and thank them for something. Like, God damn it. Now, that might sound a little ungrateful, but that's something the narcissist does. They make you, like, right there and then, like, can I do this on my own terms? Now, if you're a little kid, yeah, fine. Little kids around Christmas time, you're a grown ass. Your kids are adults at this point. Let them call the parents on their time. And I'm not blaming you for this. I almost called you by your name. I'm not blaming you for this. This is the position they put you in. Like, wait a minute. These are adult children. It's very nice you send them $300, but they don't need to call you, right? Why don't you call them? You couldn't call them when they were little. Why? For money? For money? $300 is that much? I mean, come on. Come on. You know, you've referred to them as royalty before. The king and queen over $300. You got to fall to your knees. Okay, at their pittance. And that's really what it is. It's a pittance. And this is 2 years ago, and you're making your adult kids gather around. Oh, thank you for your $300 that they could probably wipe their ass with, right? We already know that. If I remember correctly, wasn't your father a doctor or something? I could have got that wrong. Okay, although I did not want my kids to cash these checks, they were adults, so I did not want to push my issues onto them. Mainly, though, I was still at the stage where I did not want to be the bad kid and get in trouble with my parents, and I knew if the checks were not cashed, my parents would be furious with me. It's always a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with any gift from the narcissist. But I believed at the time that not accepting their gifts was more of a damning choice. Well, especially because at that point, you know, if they just out of nowhere just decide not to accept their gifts, like, you know, it's going to cause an issue. They're going to ask why. I mean, even though I'd want to know why $300 check isn't cashed. So, but here you are. I mean, you got it right. You're the bad kid. You're going to get in trouble because, you know, you didn't acknowledge their pittance. Okay, and then show up at the throne of misery. Okay? You didn't show up at the throne of misery soon enough to be made miserable. Don't show up at the narcissist throne of misery. And that's what you're doing there. The king has bequeathed $300. Now you must approach the throne of misery and be made miserable. All of you. And you set it up because you don't want to be the bad kid. I recall a check my dad sent for my birthday 28 years ago when I was in graduate school. As like with his more recent checks, he sent a generic card and wrote a purposely cold and unloving sentiment and signed it. I don't recall what he wrote except that it hurt me very, very deeply. Okay, because you're looking for love from a rock. That's why it hurts you. You want love from the throne of misery? The throne of misery only has misery for you. You wanted love. What do you think? You're going to get sentiment from the love from the sentiment from the throne of misery? No! You only get misery. That's why it's the throne of misery. My grandmother, Virginia, had the throne like that. The chair was the fucking throne of misery. Don't talk to her when she's sitting in the rocking chair because it's just step forth and be made miserable. That's it. My mom never bothered to sign cards. I remember being so offended by his coldness that I thought to not cash the check. Although $100 was a lot of money to me, a poor student, it was nothing to my parents, who were very well off and literally threw thousands at my brother. Exactly. I knew your parents. Remember you said your parents were well off. So why, if they're throwing thousands, you're jumping at $300 for your kids and $100 for yourself? when those checks are all written from the throne of misery? It was always such a contrast how they threw money at him, but were exceedingly cheap with the girls. Thinking about this contrast fueled my anger, and I ultimately decided to cash it, and I really needed the money. I would have expressed thanks to them on my birthday if they had called, but they did not. A couple of weeks after my birthday, I called them to thank them. My mother castigated me for my tardiness. I explained to her that I did not call right away because, frankly, I was a bit stunned by the coldness of the card. She fired back, "Well, you took the money anyway, didn't you? You're so selfish. You angered the throne. You were supposed to be made miserable right quick. How dare you take time, okay? So take time to accept your misery. Misery will be dealt immediately upon receipt of any kindness from the narcissist." Fast forward to Christmas 2017, my dad sent a check for my kids for a generous $500 each. The card read, "Merry Christmas. We expect to hear from all of you in the coming new year. Love, Dad." The word "all" was in caps and underlined. Well, I had no intention of calling them, and certainly not after this ultimatum. Seriously, you could not pick up the phone if he wanted to talk with. He could pick up the phone if he wanted to talk with us all. I fully comprehended that it pained my miserly dad to write $500 checks. I also fully comprehended that my parents finally realized that I was no contact, and so these larger checks were a hoovering manipulation tactic. I'm sure that my dad assumed that the bigger gift absolutely obligated us into calling and thanking them. The larger amount was his unsubtle way of trying to use my kids as pawns to force us to call them. My kids actually, all on their own, innocently decided they felt uncomfortable accepting such a large sum. I bought a card and composed a short, sweet thank you note saying that we hoped that they were doing well and had a nice holiday. I mailed it on the 26th. The card did not mention that we would not cash the checks. The four of us then left town to join Greg's family in Florida for a family reunion. Here is the chronology of the shitstorm fallout. My parents called our home phone around January 5th, but did not leave a message. We were not home, so we did not get the call. Note, apparently their phone did work in the opposite direction. My sister had sent a couple of bottles of wine, which could not be delivered because it required a signature, and we were in Florida. The shipping company sent her an email saying they had made 2 attempts and they would make one more. If this concerned my sister, it did not do so enough to motivate her to call my home or cell number at that time to inquire about the package. She was also not motivated to call our home number or my cell simply to wish us happy holidays. On January 7th, my mother called Greg's cell phone and left a garbled message. It was garbled because he was in the Bahamas and not get good reception. He called me and told me that my mom had tried to reach him and something about them being worried about us. This call was, of course, a weak hoovering attempt. I was back at home now, but she did not call our home number or my cell. Obviously, if she was truly worried about us, then she would have called our home number once again and my cell. On January 10th, my sister called my cell and said that Mom and Dad had been trying to desperately reach me and were worried that something had happened, and she was worried because we did not yet get her package. I told her that if their worry was genuine, they would have left a message on our home phone and also on my cell. Additionally, I told her we sent a thank you card, which they would have received on December 27th. Therefore, they had heard from us, and so the desperate to reach us and really worried story was a farce. I told my sister that they were just furious that I had fallen out of rank by not calling them on Christmas Day. Yeah, you didn't approach the throne of misery. Yeah, there's hell to pay. I mean, the throne needs to be fed, needs its supply. I emphasized that if they had wanted to talk to us on Christmas Day, they could have picked up the phone. I pointed out to her that rather than being personally angry with me for not calling our parents this one Christmas Day, it would be more logical and appropriate for her to be 30 times more angry at them for not calling me for 30 consecutive Christmases prior to this one. In a follow-up email the next day, I told her that this was the last time I would defend myself to her against our parents' allegations and lies. She had no reply. I am speculating that she probably realized she had pinned herself in front of the king and queen, so to speak. The king and queen, there you go. Not so to speak. The king and queen's jester here. In other words, she felt that she needed to stick with our parents' my parents' version of events to disguise her participation in the histrionics. I'm speculating here, but I have to say that if she had simply been caught up in a misunderstanding, then I would have expected it to be important to her to call and clarify such. Fast forward to that next February, and my parents called my son on his cell phone at college, made a tiny bit of small talk, and then cut right to the chase. Say, did you cash that check we sent you for Christmas? Obviously, they were calling because they saw their statement and the checks were not cashed. My son felt on the spot and did not really know how to respond, so just said thank you and that he had forgotten it back home. Immediately after they got off the phone with him, they called my daughter's cell. So they do know how to call people. Like 1 minute later, she was not able to answer as she was at work. They did not leave a message. It irked the shit out of me that my parents had no interest in calling and chatting with my kids and only called to investigate the checks. And lo and fucking behold, their goddamn phone did work in the opposite direction once again. Not accepting their gift caused them narcissistic injury, and they were furious. Yeah, well, the throne wants its supply. To counterattack, I immediately composed an email that explained that as a family had decided not to cash the checks because they were too generous and we did not feel right about accepting such a generous sum. This was absolutely true. I concluded with, thank you again for your generosity and also for the warm sentiments you wrote in the card. Note, I'm fully aware that I have made assumptions and speculated about my parents' and sister's thought processes, and so this story is one-sided. However, the fact is that all this can be distilled down into a very fundamental truth. If my parents' generosity and worry were the least bit genuine, they would have left a message on our home phone and my cell phone at least once. You can't make this shit up. Treasure travel. Yeah. I would have told them, $500 checks is a lot to not just cash. I would have told them that I wasn't cashing it, because they don't know. They see it's not being cashed, but I'd want to know if I had that money. However, it's not about whether or not you cash the checks. It's about, again, it's a pittance. And whatever it is that they think that they can get away with to get you to call them and to accept your misery is what they're doing. Is getting you, to approach the narcissist while they're sitting in the throne of misery. Because there's only misery you're going to get. You're expecting love and compassion from anything sent from the throne of misery? No, there's only misery. And when you call it and approach it, you get what you get. So, I hope that helps. Sorry for the delay, Treasure Travel, but thank you again for another contribution and story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you guys. Without you, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance. Take care.